CSAT, and you're going to find at least one family engagement coordinator, like myself or Amy, working in the CSAT that can help you help families that have a child in special education. A requirement to be in this position is each of us has to have a child or a young adult with a disability. And I myself have 4 sons. My oldest is 30. Then I have an almost 29-year-old who brought me into the world of special education, well, disability, when he was 10 months old, and he had his first seizure that lasted over an hour. And then from there, the rest of our journey took us through. And to this day, even now, he still has seizures, so it's something that we will always live with. But intellectually, he has an intellectual disability. So intellectually, he's about a 4, 5, 6-year-old as far as reading, math, and some of his social skills. But he has worked successfully for over 6 years at the same job every Monday. He works at Marshall's department store out in Delafield, so I encourage everyone to go out there and shop because they do really wonderful work with individuals with disabilities and offering opportunities for employment. So he's 29, and then I have a set of 26-year-old twins as well. So I have to have that lived experience in order to help other families and to help educators understand the family's perspective. So that's a little bit about me. I'm going to turn it over to Amy.
Yeah, hi everyone, I'm Amy Elsner. I'm a colleague of Sherry's here in CISA 1. As she explained, we all have to have a child or a young adult with a disability, and that is my 3rd child. He is 16, he is a freshman in high school, and then I also have an 18-year-old who's a senior in high school and a 21-year-old who is a senior at University of Madison. So my youngest son, Sam, was born with Down syndrome, and we did not know that that was going to happen to us. And so that was when our journey started with day 1, and having 2 other young children at home, it was extremely an interesting transition. But as I learned how to navigate the school system and received help from educators in early childhood, and then throughout elementary, and now we are well into our journey of transition and learning all about that. It has been eye-opening and always something new every single day, today included. So we're excited to be here today and share with you some of our ideas that come from our grant and also some of the work that's taking place here in Waukesha. And with that, and if in the back my voice drops off, I'm struggling with the throat and cough thing that everyone else seems to be having. So to get started, I just want to share, we have a few goals that we're going to touch on today, and that is to just share some general ideas around family engagement activities and thoughts and basic research of why we know that this work is so important, okay? And part of that is going to be sharing later on. Sherry's going to share some school data and some of the work that the team that Patty mentioned has started here already in Waukesha and what that's going to look like. And then also, so that we all have a similar launching pad for this work the district is embarking on, we're going to share some family viewpoints and perspectives. Obviously you guys are coming in the door with a lot of your experiences as teachers and educators, and we want to also help bring the lens that families who have students with disabilities and IEPs bring to this as well. But to get started, we want to have you all reflect on what your experience was when you were in school and what family engagement looked like for you and how your parents related your teachers to the other educators that they might have crossed paths with while you were in high school, in middle school, whatever that might have looked like. What you've learned through your becoming a teacher, through your coursework, through your work with the families that are on your caseload, and then also what does family engagement mean, or what would it look like to you? What do you think of that as of today? And that will kind of be our starting and launching point. So if we're just going to take a few minutes, you can do some personal reflection, talk to your table partners, share a few ideas, and then we'll ask a couple of people to share out on each of these topics. So that's how we're going to get started with your own personal experience around your school experience. All right. Conversation.
feel like I sucked up a healing fluid or something with this. Is it a little easier to hear in the back with the microphone? Is this better? Okay. All right. If I could get a couple of volunteers to share out what your family engagement experience was when you were in school, that would be great. Or anything that you'd want to share about how your families came to school to support you. I can share mine. You know, they showed up at sports events and band concerts. Probably some parent-teacher conferences.
We said too that when you had homework, you just did it. You didn't really, your parents didn't say, go sit down and make sure you do your homework. You just came home and that's what you did, and that was expected.
We had a similar conversation that like parents went to conferences, and like if there was like a spaghetti dinner or something at school or some type of like spring concert, they would go to that stuff and they would check your report card and be like, okay, get your homework out. But that was it. They were like not calling school all the time or sending notes to school. It was like, it was expected that was our job and ability, stuff like that.
Anyone else?
I taught a lot of school, so I think my parents preferred not having contact from school because generally that meant I was talking to my parents. So.
Okay, good, thank you. So we can all agree it looked a little bit different than maybe what we're seeing with our families today. Anyone want to comment on how you feel family engagement is for you, or what you know about it through your student teaching, or what you've discovered on your own that you'd like to share? Or anyone who is a parent, want to share what your experience is with your child's school?
I have two sons, one who I have to be very involved with and one who I don't have to be as involved with. And I've just learned that that's what my younger son needs to be successful, and not even necessarily academically, but just the fact that he knows there's communication between myself and his teacher that helps keep things more positive and on track for him. So.
Yeah, great, thank you. It makes a difference when our kids know that we care what's going on in school. Yeah. So. And anyone have a thought of what they think family engagement looks like, or what they'd like it to look like, that you want to share before we get into sharing some of our resources?
A lot of kids on my caseload, it's a daily communication with their parents, and I like that they also give me information back, so it's kind of a two-way street, which is really helpful.
Awesome.
Do all of your families respond back and forth, or not?
Not always. Not
Okay.
always. It kind of ebbs and flows sometimes, but it is very important to me when I do get back from them, and it usually puts a lot of pieces together. So I just keep trying, and eventually, hopefully, they come around.
I was just going to say that I think it's key to have a relationship, some sort of a relationship with the families, where you can easily talk back and forth.
Yeah, that's awesome. And how you go about building that relationship is really what we're talking about with family engagement. So, cool. Just real quick, curiously, we forgot to ask earlier, how many here are parents of young children, or children still in the education system? So, about half the room.
How many of you have a child with a disability? Anybody? Oh, yeah. Okay. So you play both roles. So you get to see both sides, especially on the other side of the IEP table. Okay. So, true confessions. How many of you would describe yourselves as helicopter parents? Nobody?
Nobody ever would.
Really? Oh, I find that hard to believe. There's got to be one helicopter or bulldozer parent, or snowplow, I think it's called. No. Okay. All right. Well, maybe later on somebody will be brave enough to say I'm a helicopter. I would think, just piggybacking on your comment, sometimes we as parents act differently or have to take a different role depending upon our child's abilities and what they struggle with. So I think in some instances, I could have been considered a helicopter parent because I was always there for my son who's 29, but my oldest son who's 30, I didn't have to. I mean, really, he did his studying, he did all the things he needed to do. I monitored his grades, I talked to his teachers, went to all parent-teacher conferences. Even though he was a straight A student, I liked talking to teachers. And the teachers would say, "Why are you here?" Because I want to talk to you, okay? But I didn't do as much intensive work as I did with my second one. So in some respects, with my 4 kids, I was a different kind of parent when it came to that family engagement and how regularly I communicated with staff. So, okay.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so thank you for sharing your experiences and your thoughts on family engagement. Real quick, just to have some grounding language, we've got a definition that comes from Stephen Constantino, who is a nationally recognized family engagement. He's written some books, a guru, basically, and just really we are talking here about how families are empowered. So that's kind of going beyond the involved, and we're going to talk about that, but empowered to support their child in their academic life, and how we can build the relationships so that parents can sustain the energy that they need to have to support their child. And just a quick plug, he is coming to town next Wednesday over at the Ingleside, and doing an all-day workshop for families and educators. So it's really awesome that we get to have him in our area. All right, next. So talking about the importance and what is the meaning of parent involvement versus family engagement, and this is just a visual that kind of illustrates that for us. You know, on the left side, they're there, they're hanging out, they're watching their child. But on the right side, or I guess it's left-right, they're actually playing and they're engaged with what their child is doing. And when we're talking about school and school activities, that's kind of what we mean by parent involvement was, you know, the potlucks, the volunteer opportunities that our students have, open houses sometimes, you know, it's all these things that are school organized and school driven, but it doesn't necessarily give our families the opportunity to have two-way communication with us and be truly engaged in their child's learning and what that looks like at school. Okay. Yeah, next slide, please. All right, so here's kind of what I just mentioned, that you know, parent involvement, and this comes from the Department of Education. Compliance-driven, school organizes it. They ask the families to come in, but it's not necessarily something where the families are getting involved in what their child is learning, and it's not linked to learning. So when we're talking about family engagement, we're talking about finding out about our families, what strengths they have, what they can bring to the table for us as educators, and how we can build and sustain those relationships that you mentioned so that they can support their child, so that things at home look very similar to what's happening at school, around academics, around behavior, around social emotional development. Right, next. And again, most importantly, it's really talking about building these relationships and how do we get to know our families so that we can have that relationship starting out at the beginning of the school year and developing it throughout the whole school year to support our children. This is a little hard to see, but it is in your packet of handouts. This is the Wisconsin version, kind of that transition from parent involvement to family engagement and what districts can do to move towards that as we put our energy and our work towards building our partnerships with our families.
So you want to turn to the back of the packet that was stapled together, and it's a two-sided, it's the very back. The front side, district-wide strategies, and the back side is moving districts from involvement to engagement.
Right. So just on the front of that, some questions for you to consider as we're building the capacity and again empowering families to be a part of their child's education, because it really has been proven that having well-engaged families, especially around our students with disabilities, helps with improving our schools and helps close those achievement gaps. Next.
So the other piece I want to just point out about this is, it's really important that not only do we offer opportunities for parents to come to workshops and things like that, but it's also important that that we think about other different strategies and ways that we can engage families that don't always necessarily involve them coming to us. So that's number one. Number two, this dual capacity framework that you see here actually speaks to the fact that we have to have conversations with educators about family engagement and the strategies and things that might work for you. And then if there's a need for support and professional development in order for you as educators to engage with families, that needs to be supported and thought about as well. That family engagement isn't just about what we do to families as far as communicating to families and sending things home and offering things for families. It's actually what we do for educators as well, to build your capacities and your knowledge and your skill base in order to be able to connect with families better. So it's actually both pieces that we're trying to work on here. And I also want to say we're not necessarily thinking about doing more.
Right.
Because I'm thinking you all might be sitting there going, all right, where am I going to find the time to do that? And that is something that we often hear from educators. But I guess, you know, what we would like to say is that if we spend the time, especially up front, getting to know our families, it will save you time in the long run as you get to know them better. So don't think of anything that we know you're doing a ton already and you're doing really awesome things. Anything we might pose for you today to consider isn't going to be wanting to add to your plate. It's maybe just taking a different look at it, maybe doing it, you know, things a little differently, rather than adding more things in. So just kind of keep that in mind as you think about some of the activities that are already happening in your building and how you can possibly tweak that to connect with families on a higher level. And if it's okay, I'm going to go back to the no mic. I'll try to speak up a little bit. That was driving me crazy. So here's just another visual for you to consider. Again, what Sherry mentioned, kind of moving away from the activities that are lower impact and don't necessarily give the families an opportunity to share their strengths with you. So again, you know, the fundraisers, the performances, the class parties, that's done at school. Families are coming in. Yeah, that's still fun, and those are really important activities so that the kids can share their learning as well. But we wanted to start engaging with families, to start sharing learning, which can look differently for everyone. You know, you have to consider your families and what their reading level might be, but it might be more than just sending home a worksheet. You might have to think about some interactive homework, ways to share strategies with families, and then even going beyond that to empowering the families so they know how to ask questions at school, so they know how to ask. They might not know what they don't know, especially when we're talking about families with IEPs. So many times they're coming in and we're saying they're equal partners, but yet they don't necessarily know the questions to ask about their child's learning, right? Because as a parent, they're struggling with a lot of things. Maybe there are a lot of health issues before they got to school. You know, maybe there's the behavior stuff going on or whatever. So by creating some more higher impact ways of connecting with our families, we can help them know and understand how they can come to school to ask for help or how they can support their child at school. So this is just a nice visual to kind of lay it out there and how we can move from this end to that end when engaging with parents. All right, and I mentioned that we're going to share some research, and these are referenced at the back of the presentation. We know through many, many years of research, especially by Karen Mapp out of Harvard and Joyce Epstein, that families that are involved, especially whoever said, I think you right there, that if our kids know that we know what's going on at school and that we care and we're keeping track of things, they are more likely to really, quite honestly, have better performance. We see suspensions go down, attendance is better, especially for those high school and middle school families. I know it's tricky. We want the kids to be independent. We want them to be able to take care of things for themselves. It's not always possible, again, especially for our students with IEPs. So we need our families to know that even though we want your kids to, maybe lead the IEP meeting, parents, you still really play an important role. So please make sure that you're here with us as well. So those are some outcomes that we see when we have parents that are involved and engaged. Here again, just another visual. When we think about the whole year, this is the time that's spent at school. This is the time that kids are away from school. So especially now that spring is coming and we know summer is hopefully around the corner. Are our families able to support their child, their learning? What is their capacity? Do they know what opportunities are out there in their community for their child to learn while they're not at school? And how can we help support our families in finding out about those resources and knowing what to do while our kids are not in school? So just want to share that to illustrate that as well. Okay, so now kind of getting onto the higher level, we know every person is unique, we know every family is unique. So when we are engaging with families, and it's not always necessarily working, in addition to what the other things I've mentioned, this is always something to keep in mind, and that is just that these might be some of the things that are happening with our families that make it really difficult for them to always come to the door and ask what's going on, because, maybe they've got changes in parental status. Maybe it's the grandparents that are the guardians. Imagine how different school today looks for them. I mean, it does for us. So really some gaps in there in knowledge on how schools work today. So again, just to keep this in mind, the inner circle typically doesn't change. We are the age that we are, and that's not going to change, but everything on the outside could possibly change, and that could just be creating stressors or barriers for our parents to be involved with their child's education. Okay, and so here's some family viewpoints. Again, something to consider for you as you're thinking about the families on your caseload. The second page right behind the pretty pink sheet, is a handout. And this is, again, just to share and consider some viewpoints that your families on your caseload might have. This is called Where Are the Parents? And we don't have time today, but I would encourage you to take some time this week and think about all the kids that you work with. And I'm guessing you probably have one that's going to fit into one of these particular scenarios about what's going on at home and what's going on outside of the classroom. So again, just something that we wanted to share with you to just bring a little parent perspective for when you're working with your families. So now, when we're starting to build relationships, these are 3 questions that the students in your classrooms have, but not only do they have those, all of your families do as well. They are wondering, do you know my child? Do you care about them? I had a friend who got an email home, and this wasn't even a child with an IEP, and it went on and on and on, and it wasn't her son's name. So it was like, well, is this even really true about my son? Or is this a totally wrong kid, and she just sent it to the wrong email address? That's kind of a little bit of an extreme, but really and truly, do you know all your kids, and do you know their strengths and their needs that are on your caseload? And then what do you know about their families and what they're bringing to the table as well? And then what families want to know about what's going on at school. I said sometimes they don't know what to ask, but they really do want to know how their child's doing. They do want you to share with them how they can support what they're learning at school and what we can do at home. As parents, do we always have time? No, you guys know that. That's real life. But we do want to know what's happening, so maybe when we do have that weekend where nothing's going on and we can do something, we have some strategies that we can help our child learn. And we also want to let us know, really, families want the best for their child, and we know at school, in order to have that happen, we need to support the teachers as well. You guys have a lot going on and a lot of stressors in your workplace as well. So what can we as parents do to help? You know, what is the language that you use for behaviors? Can we use that at home so that we're all talking about the same thing? And how will that help at school? How can we communicate what's happening at home so that you guys understand why Sam went to school today and had, you know, an incident right off the bat because he was upset this morning. So, you know, just being able that parents are comfortable knowing they can communicate with you as well is very helpful. And sharing data with our families as well. You know, we know our kids have assessments and they're assessed to death sometimes it feels like. But even if we know what that is as a parent, do we understand the scores and how that relates to how our child is doing? And how does that relate to other kids the same age in the class? Being able to understand some of that and share some of that information with the parents in a language that they can understand is very helpful, really. Because we as parents, we don't understand all the stuff that you guys send home sometimes. So making that easy for us as parents is great as well. And then these are just some core beliefs that we'd like to share. And I guess as you read these, think about, you know, do you really believe it? Do you believe all your families, for all your students on your caseload, really do want the best for their children and are doing everything possible? And I know that sounds like kind of a challenging question because of course we think everybody wants the best for their child. But really sometimes it's not always possible. So what can we as schools and educators do to help our families that might be struggling with some of the things that get in the way with having the best for their children? And also the responsibility for building the partnerships. It really is hard for some of our families to come to school and say, hey, I want to come in and I want to, you know, do this and help out and learn how to learn. I mean, it's just not possible. And especially in Waukesha, knowing you guys have a large Hispanic community, so you have a language barrier and then also whatever the cultural barrier is, how they view school, what do they know about schools, just keeping some of that in mind, that it may take reaching out more than 10 times, it might take a really long time to make that connection. So I just wanted to point that out as well. And again, parents and school staff should be equal partners. So just, we have these statements up here for you just to consider what you feel about them as we start down the journey of this work with your district.
You said it faster than the slide. Keep going.
Okay. If you guys
One more.
are interested in learning more about these core beliefs, there's a great book that's referenced in the back called Beyond the Bake Sale. And so many times when we think about family engagement or parent involvement, we think about bake sales and volunteering and that type of thing. And that's where these core beliefs actually came from. Ann Henderson and company wrote the Beyond the Bake Sale. I think Karen Mapp might have had a hand in it too. And so they really outlined some really cool perspectives to think about how we can think about family engagement differently. And we'll have a handout in a little bit that we'll reference as well that comes from that book that you can see. It'll hopefully kind of start the conversation. So, now it works. Okay, so again, just to think about some barriers that your families might have. You know, if we really truly believe they do want to be fully engaged, be in school and help their child every night with whatever they need help with, whether it's homework or practicing stuff, what are some things that could be barriers to our families? And so we just present this list again to you. I'm sure you guys all know it. Because you hear that this maybe is what's happening and why our families can't necessarily always get to our events at school. One thing I did think of, while I was looking at this too now, is the security that we all have to have in school. It's a few years now, so we're all getting used to it. But at first, you know, you gotta buzz in, you gotta say who you're going to see, you need an ID to get your little sticker. I've been in some school districts, I have to give them my car keys if I'm going in beyond the office.
how intimidating that is for families who might not be comfortable coming anyway. So again, we know it's necessary, but really just thinking about how we can make that as easy as possible for families to feel welcome. So, and with that, Sherry's going to share some practices about having a welcoming school. All right, so I'm going to go back into this.
Yep, all right. So on the slide here, we're going to talk about some best practices, and the rest of this presentation is really going to be on ideas and things strategies that researchers have found in their work with school districts across the United States as far as things that help to improve family engagement and are linked to learning, which means better outcomes for students. So here on the screen here, you'll see some of Karen Mapp's research on how and why parents are involved in their child's education. She asks parents to identify, so what did school staff actually do that created that trusting and respectful relationship? Karen Mapp found that high-performing, low-income schools, they welcomed, honored, and connected families with what was happening in class. She calls this the joining process, so that's what you see here. This is her visual for that process. And in that joining process, she found that it creates a school where everyone feels like they're members of a family. All right, next slide. All right, so remember there's welcoming, honoring, and connecting, okay? So the definition of welcoming states that families feel at home, are comfortable, and feel a part of the school community. And to feel at home, there is a familiarity, a functional yet relaxed environment, and the sense that the person belongs. Now, just what Amy talked about is one of those things that families talk to us all the time about, that when I come to school, I have to ring the doorbell and somebody lets me in. And sometimes the person behind the speaker says, yeah, hello. Otherwise, some schools that I've gone to, the person who's speaking after I buzz says, welcome to our middle school. Welcome to. Who are you here to see? And they're really friendly. It makes a difference, that first impression. And for families, it's huge. Let's see, for families with disabilities, the sense of belonging can even be more elusive because number one, our children have a disability, and so along with that, all these regular ed, standard curriculum, general curriculum sometimes doesn't apply to our child, and so then we even feel more like an outcast. For schools and classrooms to become more welcoming to parents and families, you first must examine your own current practices and begin by asking how you can help parents to become more familiar with the school and the staff who work with it. So on the screen here, you'll see there are some suggestions. So school facilities are welcoming. Staff and parents and visitors greet each other in a genuinely friendly way. School leaders, staff, and parent groups are easily accessible. And school staff are responsive to different backgrounds and cultures of families. So that is just some of those attributes or activities, strategies in which schools that have those types of characteristics have found that families report they feel more welcome and that they belong. Okay, this one talks about the honoring, okay? So this essentially is meeting parents where they are. Assume that all families and parents want their students to be successful in school and recognize that family members are as concerned about student achievement as the educators are. When educators take time to understand the family's interests and concerns and priorities, it sends a powerful message to parents that educators honor what parents have to offer in support for their students' achievement. Some on the side here, some of the ideas. The school community has a philosophy of true partnership where power is shared. And when we say power is shared, it doesn't mean parents are coming to the table and they have as much say as
teachers, educators, principals, administrators. No, it just means parents are invited to come to the table to help in decision making. Now, families are already invited in the IEP process, but we're even talking beyond that as well. So when you think about PTOs and school governance or councils, site councils, are there parents of children with disabilities that participate in those groups? Parents are given a real voice and representation, and the school solicits and listens to ideas and is responsive to diverse needs of families. Right? Next one. Okay. So this one talks about connecting to a supportive environment. And this is where school staff develop relationships with families by engaging in ongoing, meaningful communication through frequent phone calls, home visits, and other types of things. So you'll see a variety of strategies on this particular slide. The one that I really like that is really catching a lot of traction is school programs and events are linked to improve student learning. We know that when information on student achievement is shared with families about their own child, and then information or strategies are shared with families as to how might you be able to help your child at home to improve in reading or math, there are a number of studies that show that it actually has a very positive impact on student achievement. And for closing those achievement gaps for students with disabilities, this is huge, especially students with learning disabilities. On that side, it talks about equipping parents with skills on how to help their children at home. Families know that school staff care about their students and have high expectations. That word expectations is huge. Too many of our families, because their child has a disability, feel their child cannot succeed. That sometimes post-secondary ed or having a job is out of reach. And that is the furthest thing from the truth, okay? So sometimes part of my job, as well as some of the educators that I've worked with over the years, is trying to convince families that your child can do things. Instead of being so focused on what your child can't do, let's flip the script and talk about what the child can do. All right, next slide. All right. So this is one of the handouts it should be a separate handout. It's like on a tan buff colored. So, and are you guys all sitting by schools, like middle school teams, special high school teams? Are you scattered throughout?
They're mostly
You're
clusters.
sitting as teams? Okay. So at the end, if we have time at the end, this is an activity that I did with the Grafton School District a couple of weeks ago too, where I handed this out at the end and asked people to sit in teams and talk about, so what kind of school are we, okay? And as you look at this, this is out of that Beyond the Bake Sale book. So remember I talked about, you know, the core beliefs of families. This comes out of there too. So are you a partnership school? And that's the one where all families and communities have something great to offer. And so you open them up, you welcome families into your schools, and they're involved and actually a part of the culture and the community of the school. The Open Door School is a little bit less inviting. I mean, they still do really, really good work. However, there's not as much kind of investment made in really building and sustaining those relationships. Then the Come If We Call School. So just what it says, we invite you in when we call you to come in and join us, okay? Doors aren't always open, okay? And then the one on the end is the Fortress School. And I don't think I need to say anymore. If you know what a fortress looks like, that school, families do not feel welcomed. And so one of the activities that you can do if you'd like to go back to your schools, because this is really looking at your school. So maybe in a leadership team or something, or all staff, you could go back to your schools, and then what you're gonna do is just check in each line, are you building relationships in which ways? And so you just check the one that best represents your school, and you go by row. And whichever one you have more in, you're probably more likely to be one of those schools, okay? And through Beyond the Bake Sale, and through using a simple rubric like this, you can start conversations about maybe things so that we as an individual team, or grade level, or a school building might want to do when we look at engaging our families and improving that engagement. Okay? All right. Then, of course, everybody knows about College and Career Ready IEPs. And so in this PowerPoint, we do have to mention that because that's what DPI wants us to do. So how do we make college and career, how do we make IEP meetings and the whole IEP process more welcoming, more respectful, and more supportive, okay? So that's that welcome, honor, and connect if you think about the joining process. So here are some ideas, okay? Sharing resources to help families learn about the IEP process. And with that, we have like the student snapshots and the positive student profile are like two handouts, yellow and white, or yellow and gray, that are here today, as well as the positive student profile. So that's a way to help families have a questionnaire ahead of time. Maybe you already have a questionnaire, but always give families some questions to think about before an IEP meeting so that they can be, not necessarily all families will be prepared, but at least they will have been given the opportunity to start thinking and preparing for that conversation. Have an agenda. Do you guys have agendas at IEP meetings? Some of you do. That's really good. I've heard a lot of school districts and schools in the area don't, but families that have experienced agendas really like that because there's always a place for parent concerns or comments, and they feel like they're actually a part of that IEP process. So that's really good. And then acknowledging family members immediately and making introductions. That's probably parents' greatest pet peeve is they come to an IEP meeting and introductions weren't provided and they don't know who that person is sitting across the table from them. And they feel unsure of themselves or stupid, or they're embarrassed to have to ask, who are you? So automatically doing introductions takes care of that. All right. And I don't know why it does that. All right. Also making sure that the parent always has a copy of the IEP and a draft if you use a draft. Find a friendly time and place, and then follow up with a phone call. That follow up with a phone call or an email is so cool. Families who have had that, just a quick phone call afterwards to say, it's been a day, the day after, just check in. Did you have any questions? Because sometimes it takes parents a day or so for them to think about that IEP meeting and say, gosh, I really wish I would have asked. And sometimes, again, they're embarrassed. They don't want to do that. And just simply a contact from you as a teacher means the world and will open up those doors.
And I'd also say for families that don't show up to the IEP, when that happens, did the team miss me? You know, did anybody notice that I wasn't there? I mean, granted, if they're not coming to the meeting, they might be difficult to get in touch with, but it's at least a step in the direction of trying to connect.
All right, so we talked about welcoming, respectful, and supportive. So you have a handout that's in the packet, and it's a list of 22 questions. It's blue, and it's the Indicator 8 questionnaire. So it looks like this. So as you look through here, all right. So, these questions that you find in here, these 22 questions, are asked of parents to answer this question up here. So the Department of Public Instruction is required by the federal government to have school districts survey parents once every 5 years. So your school district has done that. They're not up again for 2 more years, I think, in 2021. But we're answering the question, the percentage of parents with a child receiving special education services who report that schools facilitated parent involvement, their involvement, as a means of improving services and results for children with disabilities, and that's for ages 3 to 21. So this is a copy of the survey, and we wanted to share this with you today because 280 staff members in the Waukesha School District took a family engagement survey. How many of you remember taking the survey? It was the beginning of March 1st through the 14th roughly. 280, general ed, special ed, teachers, staff, all took the test. Took the survey. 248 families took that same survey, okay? So what I want you to do is I'm going to give you just a couple of minutes to take a look at these questions, and anybody, well, you know what, we don't have a whole lot of time as I'm looking. Darn it, 4:26. Okay, so I was going to have you guys guess. Anybody want to guess what the highest rated question by families was? Anybody want to guess? Shout it out. What question do you think families had the highest percentage of agreement with?
Input on IEPs, maybe?
And that's number what? What number question? All right, if we go to the slide, the next slide, we have the answers. I was going to have you guys do this activity. Oh, it should be. Okay, so I will give you the answers. Okay, so it is question 8. Question 8, which is, in IEP meetings, we talk about my concerns and ideas. That had the highest percentage of agreement, and I say kudos to all of you, okay? Because that means you guys are getting input from families, and I'm just super, super excited when we did the analysis. The second highest was, second highest is question, I don't know what happened to it. Question 5, then question 7, and question 4. So those were the 4 questions that were the highest.
If you
So
find
that
the
was
slide,
8.
if you find the slide, I can always send it out to them.
Yeah, 8, 5, 7, and 4. The
they'll be
lowest agreement questions were 18, 19, 20, and 22. Okay. So then I took a look at the 280 staff members, and I want to give you what you as staff members, general ed, special ed. So number 12 was the highest rated at 99.28%. Number 12. Then number 8. Number 6. And number 13. And then the lowest agreement for staff was 22, 15, 18, and then this was a shocker, 1. And that shocked me. But that was the 4th lowest in agreement for staff. So I just thought, wow, staff members thought parents weren't equal partners in an IEP meeting, and that just kind of shocked me. But anyway, I will send this along to Patty, and this is part of what the family engagement team's work will be, is looking at indicator 8 results. So with that being said, let's go to this one, and I'm gonna have Patty just talk about the family engagement team.
Yeah, let me briefly tell you a little bit about our team. Very important, we have two parent liaisons. Robin Hart Schultz has been a liaison for several years now. Her son is now 20 and will soon be ending his tenure with the district, and Robin will be leaving us as well. That is why I've contacted the secondary special ed chair people asking for parent recommendations. I would really like another parent of a child at the secondary level with an IEP because they're getting ready for transition, and that's really a helpful set of information for parents to be able to access from another parent. So if you have a recommendation, if any of you do have a parent that you feel is a good communicator, well-versed, learning more about the IEP process, personable, wouldn't be afraid to take phone calls and talk to parents, please let me know. Jamie Cannon is our other parent liaison. She has a young child, a daughter with a disability in 5K, and she's extremely motivated. Jamie's extremely motivated. She's a former professional in marketing, and she is taking on this parent liaison role seriously. She's doing a lot of the classes at CISA. She's very involved. She fosters a lot of communication with other parents. In our transition to find another person, you can send parents to Jamie for questions about transition. She is gathering all that information as she can from CISA, so she's also trying to be a resource for that as well. We have a couple of general educators from the elementary level. I am looking for more general educators from the secondary level who have an interest in being involved in engaging parents of children with disabilities. If you have a suggestion in that area, let me know as well. The rest of that list are our special educators, and many of them are in the room today. So if you are here, please stand up. Therese Missling, Becky Carlson, Haley Krieger, Kim Sadowski, Jody Jackson, Mackenzie Retzloff, Karen Knopf. These are people who come to the meeting full of ideas. They're not going to stand, they're over there. Full of ideas and very eager to foster this, getting parent engagement at a stronger level for our students in our district. So again, if you have questions, if you have an interest, these are people that are resources for you, as well as me. You can contact me if you have more questions.
Excellent. Thank you, Patty. And the other key point that we have been told as WSBE staff from and DPI has told us that they will offer the stipend next year for school districts to do family engagement planning. And so we fully intend that Waukesha will continue with this work next year, and are really, really excited about this work. So the next slide, if you'll just, so I have 432. We have a really brief video from Karen Mapp that just talks about powerful partnerships, and she is the guru about family engagement. So let's just, yeah, okay, yeah.
There are stories that both teachers and parents and other school staff have shared with us that are examples of powerful partnerships. So for example, Eileen shares a story in the beginning of the book about Jorge, and we've changed the names of the students obviously, but she talks about how when Jorge came into her classroom, how he was not reading at grade level. He was, in fact, well behind that. And with the collaboration with his mom, who came to, I guess, a parent-teacher conference in tears. And I guess Jorge was with her. They were in tears because they both realized that he was behind. And so Eileen talked to the mom about, you know, what are some of the things that you're already doing? What are the things you can tell me about Jorge? How can we work together in partnership to try to get him where he needs to be around his reading? Well, lo and behold, because of the relationship that they built the way that they shared information, the way that Eileen was able to share with mom about what are some of the things that you could be doing at home, and the mom was able to share her knowledge of her son with Eileen. And I think that's really important, because when we talk about partnerships are reciprocal, they're two-way, and I think too many times in schools what we do is we talk at our families and we don't listen to what they have to say about their children. They have all this wonderful, what Debbie Pusher would call parent knowledge that we need as educators to do our jobs. And so through this partnership, lo and behold, by the end of the year, Jorge was able to read, he was making progress, he was excited, and mom really felt that her role had shifted in terms of how she was able to help support her child's learning. So that's just one of the many examples we have in the book, because we thought it was really important for people reading the book to hear the voices of parents and teachers and others, to show that yes, this can happen, to give people hope that they can actually replicate and execute some of these strategies in their own classrooms.
And just to mention really quick, The Powerful Partnerships is a book that Kieran Mack wrote. It's her greatest, latest, newest book. And it's one of the activities that we're doing as a family engagement team. So the team is actually reading Powerful Partnerships, and there are all sorts of little vignettes and examples of putting things into practice that are in that book. Finally, in summary, families impact the individual child's learning. True collaboration is a process rather than an event. So too often times we think of having a workshop and it's not connected. One of the things I should mention is part of the family engagement team's efforts is holding a literacy series. So tomorrow night and Friday morning, Jody Jackson, as well as Nancy and Jamie and I can't remember who else, all at Horning Middle School, but we're offering a literacy series, and it's a 3-part literacy series that engages families around the topic of literacy and reading. So it's not just an event, but it's multiple events and multiple contacts. And then family school partnerships equal improved academic outcomes for students. So the last couple of slides have all our references and resources and things like that that are available. So I ask that the very last slide has a link. So if you don't want to fill out the paper evaluation, it's a half sheet that's sitting in front of you. You can go out to that link and answer the 4 questions on the final slide. One more. Okay, there it is. All right, so thank you so much.